Right now, big banking, software, pharmaceutical, and tobacco corporations are lobbying governments from 12 countries to negotiate the dirtiest deal you've never heard of. There's a reason you haven't heard of the TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership. There are some major corporations and government officials that don't want you to know what's in the deal. For one, our food safety standards, environmental protections, and local labor laws could all be threatened under the TPP. We could all be forced to pay significantly more for the medicines we need, and you could be fined or even sent to jail for downloading copyrighted content on the internet. How will they know if you do it? Because your internet service providers could be required to watch your online activity. But that's not even the scariest part. The TPP gives corporations the power to sue our government in secret foreign tribunals over any law or regulation they claim affects their expected future profits. Don't believe it? It's already happening. Recently, after Canada said U.S. big pharma corporation Eli Lilly's drug price-raising patents were not legit, the firm sued the Canadian taxpayers for a staggering $500 million. And now billions of dollars are being demanded from Germany after it decided to phase out nuclear power following the Fukushima disaster and improve environmental standards for coal-fired electric plants. Philip Morris and Chevron are in on the game too, raiding taxpayer dollars and trying to reverse crucial policies we all rely on. Thankfully, not everyone is willing to sign on the dotted line just yet. In fact, most government officials still have no idea what they're even signing on to, for good reason. So far, Democrats and Republicans in the House of Representatives have united against fast-tracking the TPP. But there is a mighty corporate lobby that wants to make sure the deal is signed and railroaded quickly through Congress before we know about the damage it will cause us. We must get our senators and representatives to stop fast-track. Here's the deal. Without a strong public outcry, politicians will only hear the concerns of multinational corporations. And once the TPP is signed, it's here forever. There's no expiration date and no separation clause. This dirty deal has been deliberately branded as a free trade agreement. It is anything but free for people like you and me. And it's not really about trade. It could cost us our internet freedom, labor rights, access to affordable medicine, the safety of our food, and protections that keep our water and air clean. Nobody wants to be stuck with a backroom deal we don't want and never voted for. Find out more, speak up, and spread the word.
No matter what promises are made, huge trade deals often just tilt the playing field further in favor of big multinational corporations.
On Tuesday, Massachusetts Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren introduced the Trade Transparency Act. It would require the president to release the scrub-bracketed text of any trade agreement at least 60 days before Congress grants fast-track authority to free trade deals, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, otherwise known as the TPP. Currently, the TPP, which accounts for nearly 40% of the global economy, has been negotiated in complete secrecy. Members of Congress have access to the text but can't discuss the details. And anyone who has read the text of the agreement could be jailed for disclosing its contents. Those who have read the text, like insider Michael Wessel, a board member of Goodyear Tires and lobbyist for United Steelworkers of America, says Senator Warren is right for being concerned. He writes in a Politico article, quote, "Nothing being considered by Congress right now would ensure that the TPP meets the goal of promoting domestic production and job creation." A new report from Senator Warren's office titled Broken Promises points out how past free trade deals have failed American workers. It examines both past Republican and Democratic presidents' rhetoric on free trade and how it often doesn't match the reality of upholding labor standards. Back in 1993, President Bill Clinton signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, also known as NAFTA. He promised that it would have real teeth to enforce labor standards.
To the men and women of our country who were afraid of these changes and found in their opposition to NAFTA an expression of that fear, what I thought was a wrong expression and what I know was a wrong expression, but nonetheless represented legitimate fears. The gains from this agreement will be your gains too.
But those promised gains turned into losses. More than 1 million U.S. jobs have been lost since NAFTA was enacted 20 years ago, according to the nonpartisan think tank Public Citizen. And last year, the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, conducted an assessment of the U.S. government's implementation of labor provisions in existing free trade agreements. Investigators found, quote, persistent challenges to labor rights, such as limited enforcement capacity, the use of subcontracting to avoid direct employment, and in Colombia and Guatemala, violence against union leaders. Attorney and activist Kevin Zeese has been on the front lines fighting against the TPP, protesting before the Senate Finance Services Committee back in January. Zeese says this bill at the end of the day is about protecting corporate interests.
The United States government is so polluted by corporate power and corporate money that they really don't investigate these abuses very thoroughly and almost never bring any kind of enforcement action. I think Obama's brought one enforcement action. Prior to 2008, there were none. And Obama's was an action that originally was complained about 6 years ago. Justice delayed is justice denied. So a 6-year delay before a complaint is brought, and then you have X number of years beyond that for it to be resolved. It may well has not even brought the complaint. So it's a burdensome, slow process because corporate power really infects our government.
Warren argues that these deals are not in the interests of workers and create advantages for corporations. For example, corporations can act outside of a country's judicial system through corporate-friendly arbitrators.
If a country wants to adopt strong new protections for workers, like an increase in the minimum wage, a corporation can use these corporate-friendly panels to seek millions or billions in taxpayer compensation because the new rules might eat into the company's profits. But boy, it doesn't work in the other direction. If a country wants to undermine worker rights by allowing child labor or slave labor or paying workers pennies an hour, there's no special worker-friendly process for challenging that. Instead, advocates for workers are stuck begging their governments to enforce their actions and their rights.
Now the Senate is on the verge of approving Fast Track. That gives the president the authority to sign a trade agreement before Congress can even vote on the deal. It also guarantees that Congress will vote on the bill within 90 days with all floor amendments forbidden and a maximum of 20 hours of debate. A path the Senate could be on by the end of the week. For the Real News Network, Jessica Devereaux, Washington.
In Screwed News, Fast Track Trade Authority on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, is moving forward. On Thursday, U.S. lawmakers reached an agreement on legislation that would give President Obama Fast Track Trade Authority to negotiate future trade deals, including the highly controversial TPP deal. The TPP, or Southern Hemisphere Asian Free Trade Agreement, SHAFTA, is being negotiated among the U.S. and 11 other Pacific nations. And like so many other so-called free trade deals, would ship American jobs overseas, do untold damage to our economy, and give corporations even more power than voters. Yet lawmakers are making it easier and easier for the TPP to become a reality. Speaking on about the deal reached on Thursday, Republican Senator Orrin Hatch said that this is a smart bipartisan compromise that will help move America forward. So, is the senator right? Is this a smart bipartisan compromise that will help America? Or another raw deal for our country and economy? Let's ask Kevin Kearns, president of the United States Business and Industry Council and the United States Business and Industry Council Education Foundation. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Good to be here with you.
Great to have you.
This is a very important subject.
I agree. And, you know, one of the things that I think is interesting about this, I'm a progressive, you're a conservative. The progressive hit on TPP principally is that it drives down wages, it hurts workers, Americans workers. NAFTA was supposed to produce hundreds of thousands of jobs. We lost 3.7 million. The South Korea free trade deal was supposed to produce jobs. We've lost millions.
Right.
What's the conservative hit on what I call SHAFTA on the TPP?
Well, there are about 4 different levels. One, just that it's an unconstitutional delegation of authority to the executive.
No, hang on. You're talking about Fast Track, not TPP, right?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, I agree with you on Fast Track, too. Keep on. Pardon my interruption.
No, that's okay. If you want to talk about the TPP itself, 12 nations are involved, including us. we are being stampeded, or the Congress is saying, oh my gosh, it's 40% of the world economy, we have to get in there. Well, the U.S. and the countries that it already has free trade agreements with, out of the 12, account for 80% of the 40%. So, you know, this is a ruse. I mean, yes, it's a fact, but four of the others that we don't have trade agreements with, New Zealand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, they have a total GDP of less than $1 trillion. So if you think we're going to save America's bacon by going into these tiny markets, no, it's not going to happen. And the other outlier is Japan, which hasn't opened its market since 1945. I mean, we occupied them, we rewrote the Constitution. I served there for 2 years in the Foreign Service in the mid-'80s. They haven't opened their markets, you know, unless we've hit them with a sledgehammer, and even then only a tiny bit. So let's not fall for these ruses, these phony statistics that try to stampede us into this agreement.
I would think the other conservative hit on these free trade deals, you know, certainly I get the one on fast track. I mean, I'm totally with you. It's unconstitutional. The Constitution says, in fact, I think that TPP, all these things, I think they're all treaties. And
That's
I mean,
right.
they perfectly fit the definition of treaties that goes all the way back to 1787.
Right.
And according to the Constitution, a treaty requires 2/3 of the Senate. And why they're not doing it like this, I don't understand. But it seems that the other conservative argument against these trade deals would be that not only is it a loss of sovereignty, but it's turning sovereignty over to an unelected body that is supranational. It's basically we're handing over to global international corporations that are soulless and in many cases stateless. I mean, GE does more than half their business outside the United States. Is this an American corporation? We're handing over to them the keys to the car. They get to run the show. They're setting up these rules.
Right. I agree with all that, but I think that we share sort of a more basic approach, and that is the average American family, the middle-class family. Yeah. We can't have a functioning democracy if we don't have a vibrant middle class. And these trade deals, they take jobs away from people, good-paying jobs where you can support a family. They unemploy people, right? They displace them with all these exports rushing in. And then we turn tax revenue, as it were, revenue producers in these people who are paying their taxes and leading good middle-class lives into tax consumers. Right. So they have to go on unemployment or disability. And
it's a new business model. I mean, Walmart and McDonald's have pioneered this thing. Pay people low enough that they'll be subsidized by the federal government.
So the corporations throw the middle-class people out of work, you know, and put them on the government tab.
So
can I just say this model is called firing your best customers.
This is the week that the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has said they're going to pass the TPP fast-track process. Of course, it's not just for TPP. It's for TTIP and any other trade agreement that comes up in the next 6 years. Last week, there was a filibuster that was shut down, and Mitch McConnell said it was going to pass this week. It will allow them in the fast-track process to pass this secret agreement that's been crafted over many years. It would allow them to pass that with just 51 votes instead of 67 by not calling it a treaty, among other things. And of course, there will be no amendments allowed to that secretly negotiated agreement. Now we see today that Mitch McConnell is not going to allow any debate on passing the Trade Promotion Authority. U.S. Senate leader moves to limit debate on fast-track trade bill. Mitch McConnell took procedural steps aimed at bringing a debate on a fast-track bill to a close, moving the controversial bill a step closer to a vote on passage. He says, "It's my hope that we would also be able to process a number of amendments and then move forward, and we'll have a couple of days to accomplish that." They'll do that by shutting down the debate. In other words, no amendments, no talking about it, just shut up and sign it. Here's the agreement. We should all be very concerned about how not only commerce and industry are being controlled by this, jobs are being given away. We should also be concerned, as we pointed out many times, about sovereignty issues.